Hey guys, Shaman,
Jamie
from Harper Therapy, and we've been talking about, I wouldn't say it's fun at all, the topic we've been talking about here this month, but self-harm in teens.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and so we started out with how to identify if you're suspicious that your teen might be self-harming. Then we went to why teens tend to self-harm.
Right.
And now today we're going to talk about how to help your teen and how to talk with your teen.
Right.
But before we start that, I just want to go through these stats were as of 2019, so Shaman and I believe that they might be off.
Yeah, they're definitely higher now.
Yes.
But I mean, this is scary if that's the case. That,
Yes.
You know, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So 18.8% of teens reported self-harming. Of that percentage, 25.5% were female and 11.6% were male. And as of 29, it was an average of 14%, whereas 2019, it's now 19%, and now we're in 2023, so we can only guesstimate.
I mean, that's 4 years old, right?
Yes.
And we've had a world pandemic, and we've had kids isolated, and it's got to be so much higher than that.
And we're seeing it so much here at the agency.
Right.
And that was really what was the reason for us doing this series. The other thing is also we want to reiterate that non-suicidal self-harm is different than suicidal intent. And so part of our intention is to educate parents and about the differences and what to look for in the differences, because we've done a lot of work with teens who have been Baker acted for non-suicidal self-harm, and that did so much damage for them.
Right.
Whereas it's hugely, very appropriate to, and you should, Baker Act for suicidal intent. The two things we look for in the difference between a non-suicidal self-harm and suicidal intent are, one, do they have a plan? And two, do they have a means of carrying it out? Again, I want to say, if your teen says, I don't want to be here anymore, there needs to be a lot of questions asked before you decide to Baker Act them, because the Baker acting can traumatize them.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of work with teens around the traumatic experiences of being Baker acted.
But I think the natural thing, and we've touched on this every week now, but I think the natural thing is, as a parent, when you notice this happening, or you discover this happening with your teen, the fear that it sets in you, right? It scares you as
Absolutely.
a parent.
Our number one job, I always tell my 5 sons, my number one job is to keep you alive.
Right.
And so if something were to scare me and I thought it was life-threatening, I would probably act in the most extreme sense possible before being educated on something like self-harm.
But I think that's the norm, right?
Exactly.
Like, parents tend to go all the way. And there's some things that can be done in this situation that are so much more helpful than going all the way.
Yeah, and we don't want, like we discussed, we don't want to normalize self-harm, and yet at the same time we're seeing a lot of it, and it is really right under the unhealthy coping mechanism category, more so than necessarily suicidal intention and everything. And so some of the things we want to talk about is how to talk to your teenager if you know that they are self-harming or suspect that they are self-harming. My teens tell me the number one reason they don't speak to their parents is because they don't want to, 1, get in trouble, or 2, be judged.
Right.
So your job as a parent is to develop a non-judgmental,
I know it's hard.
opening. And so as a therapist, what I have worked with families to do, and this is something you can do on your own at home as well, is we call what's called a safety zone. And that means it is a contracted agreement with your teen that if they ask for a safety zone, that means they are allowed to share with you things that are happening in their life without fear of, 1, judgment, and 2, punishment. And so, and it's agreed upon. They go through, Mom, Dad, I need a safety zone. Mom, Dad's like, put down what you're doing. Absolutely. Have a seat. What is it? And learn what it is. And we are here, to help you navigate that. But that's, the one is being patient and non-judgmental. That means inform your face, right?
Can't go.
Inform your face that you are not judgmental and everything. The other one is open-ended questions. So not a yes or a no, but tell me what's happening inside of you. How did that relationship impact you? If you see, your friend, they're having difficulty with their friends, or maybe the end of a romantic relationship,
Sure.
asking the open-ended questions.
Sure. And we've already talked a little bit about how this is, a lot of times, it's tough to be a kid, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
And, there so much is going on in their bodies and in their brains, when they're in the teenage years. Just learning how to cope with emotions and struggles, and and come on, our society's not great on teaching people how to cope with anything, right? Like we're pretty bad about overprotection and things like that. So kids don't learn a lot of skills about coping. They don't learn coping mechanisms.
Right.
And cutting is a coping mechanism.
Yes.
It's not a great one, but it is.
Yes, yeah. And a lot of the time I've had a lot of teens share with me that they are in a crisis mode situation. They are in intense pain or having intense anxiety, and it has been used to direct their thoughts and their energy, and the other is it's been used to keep them from feeling a sense of numbness and disassociation. So it is a coping mechanism used with really intensified emotions, and it's something that can be that they can get through, and they can develop healthy coping mechanisms.
Right. Think about what, we're talking about something like a kid wanting to be grounded, right? Like, how do I deal with this very hard emotional thing in my life?
Yes.
And if I knew how to ground myself, I could deal with that.
Yeah.
Or I could chunk it down and deal with the pieces of it.
Exactly.
Right? And how much better would it be if your kid had those coping mechanisms? And those are things we teach here.
They want to not hurt themselves.
Right.
And so when you give them a tool to use in place of harming themselves, they are very receptive. We've had great success with working with our teens who are self-harming, and we bring in the families once a month to work alongside, and it's been a very positive thing. They have life skills that they'll have for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so if you suspect that your teen is self-harming and you're not really sure how to cope with it, there's two things. We would love for you to call us here at Harper Therapy, and there's also the 211, which is a mental health hotline for odd hours and times of the week that you can also get direct assistance.
Absolutely. Our number here is 813-434-3639, and we'll see you next week.